A dungeon. A tired, young man can barely walk deep into the cave. He was not happy with his own idea to come here. The dungeon is of the 6th level. Usually, a group of one hunter of the 5th rank and a few of the 6th rank gathers in such dungeons. Our hero was a 7th ranked hunter. Despite his talent in fencing, he was unable to use mana, magic, energy, so he decided to take part in the clearing, hoping that he could at least slightly increase his rank. However, he miscalculated his strength. He shouldn't have tried to bend over backwards. The raid leader promised the man a mana stone if I helped him clear a rank 6 dungeon. Most of the team members were supportive, but now, considering the leader, they all died. As soon as the monster catches up, my exhausted body will also lie on the cold ground. Realizing this, the hero continues to walk, postponing his death only for a short time. The less tired he is, the higher his chances of surviving the battle. This idea seemed much more attractive to the man. Much better than tiring himself out by running away only to die in the end anyway. The giant has already caught up with the hero. This giant has a body made of mana and covered with steel. It looks like a golem, but is incomparably more flexible and agile. The monster has only one weak spot, the solar plexus. However, due to the fact that its entire body is covered in steel, it is almost impossible to deal with it without mana. This creature rarely appears in dungeons of the 5th rank, let alone the 6th. It's impossible. Before dying, the team weakened the monster by constantly hitting it in the chest. This gives a small ray of hope. So, maybe the hero will manage to get out alive. With the last of his strength, the man began to dodge the giant's blows, and at the decisive moment, he struck a powerful blow to the monster's weak spot. However, the giant did not die, but dealt the man a critical blow. Barely standing up, the hero quickly broke through to the monster's weak point with his last strength and struck again. The giant exploded. The man died with it, pierced by a stone fragment. If he had known that this was how it would end, he would never have made this choice. The hero's soul began to depart to the next world, but he still felt himself. He did not realize what was happening. He had passed into another world. The silhouette of a dragon appeared out of the blue flicker. It told him that the period of study was over. As a reward for completing the lesson, the hero will receive a unique ability. After that, he will be transferred to the next training location, the continent of Pantheus. The protagonist found himself in an unknown place. He was going to the visa office with some people. He did not understand what was happening. After all, he had just fought a giant. Then he heard a voice. He remembered that they wanted to take him somewhere. The hero realized that it was not a fiction, and it was the same place, Pantheon. He could not understand that his whole past life was a fiction and a mere training. Those brave hunters who risked their lives to clear the dungeon, his battles in which he put a lot of effort, none of it was real. The man refused to believe it. The message said that he had awakened. He remained a hunter, despite the fact that he could not use mana. The hero was described, and his identity was revealed. He was a man named Hanli in level 17, occupation none, title none, strength 22, dexterity 26, endurance 24, wisdom 22. Skills achieved: average ability to control a sword, partial martial arts lord. The system identified him as a hunter with levels and skills. In fact, he was born again. Hanli could not accept this. The landscape on Pantheus was a little different from the usual Earth landscape. The man next to Han noticed that the boy was a bit confused and told him to pull himself together. The cart was almost at its destination. It looked like a training camp. When everyone arrived, they were ordered to get off the cart in a certain order. Han thought it was some kind of army, so it was his turn to get off. When everyone got off, a man calling himself Instructor Luke said that he was responsible for them. He would oversee their training for the next 2 weeks. The other soldiers called him the Joker. because, as he said, he is a good joker. Pantheus training ground. To begin, the instructor ordered us to run 50 laps around the training ground. It shouldn't have been difficult, according to him. Everyone was outraged. Han pointed out that the grounds were twice the size of a soccer stadium in South Korea. He thought they would die before running that far. The first 5 events seemed easy for Khan. On the 14th lap, he felt tired. During the 20th lap, it was very difficult for him. Despite the fact that the guy had some physical training, it became difficult for him. However, he liked the fresh, local air. He began to breathe in more and felt the mana from his lungs spread throughout his body. It calmed his muscles. He could feel his tense muscles starting to recover. He also began to see the mana. It was amazing. The mana looked like little yak stars flashing around. It looked beautiful. Unexplainable things that defied logic continued to happen. Hanli got a new feature of mana. It will help him in his time of need. Mana is the dominant energy in the world. It is not easy for the human body to cope with it. The gods were beginning to pay attention to them. Did mana really appear in the boy's body? Han felt as if he could walk on fire. What an interesting guy, the instructor thought. Some people could not even run 50 laps, and he continued to run confidently after the 50th. Khan started to smile. This amused Luke, the instructor. He noted that they hadn't had a decent one for a long time. But there were still many challenges ahead. Han Lian found himself in an unknown place. All he remembered was that he had arrived on the Pantheon. A door appeared in front of him. When he wanted to open it, he heard a voice. He heard a woman's voice saying that he needed to be given a name. Some memories began to appear in the boy's mind. The woman in the memories called him Lian Yegis. Li started crying, and he didn't understand why. He began to dream about spending time with a woman, probably his mother, about learning to ride horses with his father, about training. He thought these were his old memories that he had lost access to. Then in his memories, he saw a fire. It engulfed the palace where Lian lived. Li's mother was covered in blood and tried to save him. They were being chased by armed men who shouted that they had to punish the traitors who had risen up against King Camillo. The mother shielded her son from the attackers. However, before the attacker struck, he was blocked by his father. He fought the armed men. However, in a moment, the father and mother were pierced by arrows. Finally, his mother told Lian that they were not traitors, but that he should find the emperor and avoid the crown prince. His parents died. Li woke up in a nightmare. He was sleeping in a barracks with other soldiers. The hero realized that it was not a dream. It was too much like a memory. However, he contradicted himself, because he believed that he had never had parents. He calmed down and thought that he shouldn't worry so much, because in any case, even if he did have them, they had abandoned him long ago. He said that he understood why this guy went to the army, the guy in whose body he woke up. Since childhood, Lian has been under the care of his grandparents. Therefore, the term, parents, was unfamiliar to him. The memories he saw were not his own, Li believed. He realized that when he died, he was reborn in someone else's body. The body was Lian Ignis's. He realized why Li had joined the army. He wanted to take revenge for his family and bring back its former glory. That was his goal. Getting the title would be a small step on the way to getting his family back. As far as the boy understood, the family's demotion was not by order of the emperor, but of the prince's successor. The mere thought of the prince made him boil with anger, as if he had become Lian himself and received his emotions. The boy decided to go to the battlefield to make a name for himself again, but he could not feel a small part of his mana. Looking at the personality of Lian Egans, we can see that the characters had a lot in common. It's worth taking time to think about. Panthea's training grounds. The instructor shouted to everyone that thanks to Lian, who had run 60 laps, there would be no training today. They will start tomorrow. He also said that including Lian, only 3 people had run 50 laps. Lee believed that everything Luke was teaching them would help them in life. So they had to give it their all. After some time, the soldiers finally finished their basic physical training and will soon start training with the sword. Lian turned to his partner, whose name was Jason. He noted that Jason used to be a mercenary. He probably dealt with people from the Camillo Kingdom. Jason had indeed dealt with them a couple of times, but he didn't want to go back to it. Their knights were very strong, not just strong, but ruthless and cruel. Only monsters were harder to deal with. Lee was surprised and wanted to ask about the monsters, but the instructor interrupted them. All soldiers must become the army of our mighty empire, and it is in Luke's interest to train the soldiers to the maximum. Starting today, everyone will be learning fencing for about 2 weeks. To survive on the battlefield, soldiers need it. Today the soldiers will learn only one stance. It is a cross-cut. This technique was the simplest, but it has saved the lives of comrades many times, the instructor said. Luke struck and cut the dummy in half. He said that if someone managed to make a good transverse cut, he would give them an extra piece of bread for lunch. Lian immediately volunteered because his sword skills were quite good and he had experience. Although he had not practiced this technique, Lian took a stance and concentrated. The instructor noticed that he had a good stance. He struck a precise blow and did everything perfectly. Luke praised him and gave him the promised slices of bread. Everyone else immediately wanted to try it. The soldiers practiced and practiced. But it wasn't enough for Luke. He said they needed to work harder because they wouldn't be able to defend the empire. He ordered them to make 10,000 more swings of their swords. Everyone was tired. Lian noticed that his stats had changed. His stamina increased by 1 point. He wondered what other parameters he could track. He started to like it. After all, there were no such opportunities in his world. Lee continued to train and stuff the training dummies. Luke saw this and thought that the boy was capable and had a desire not to give up, so he was perfect for them. Luke ordered us to stop training. After a 5-minute break, there would be lunch. He said that he would evaluate them during the fencing. Lee raised his hand. He asked how the grades would affect them, and what were the benefits of getting good grades. The instructor said it would affect which unit they would be assigned to. Those with the highest scores would be able to go to the capital. Lee asked what were the benefits and prospects of serving in the capital. His partner replied that it was an honor to defend the capital. In addition, if you distinguish yourself in front of your superiors, you can get a promotion. In addition, it is the safest place. You don't have to risk your life often to go into battle. Lee began to think. On the one hand, in his situation, it was better for him to escape to the capital. On the other hand, if he stayed there, he would not get the growth he wanted. He wanted to be the best. Since childhood, he was looked down upon because he was an orphan. It seemed that if he became a hunter, he would be able to feel confident in front of everyone and always get attention. But no matter what he did, he could not feel the mana. But now things might be different. A master. A master is a dream, the one who stands above all swordsmen. It would be nice if he could achieve that Lian's goals with his own. The boy asked himself a question again and raised his hand. He asked where the most dangerous place was. The instructor was surprised, noting that not a single student had ever asked such a question. Lee said that there had never been a student as talented as him. The instructor laughed and said that he was right about something. Lian wanted to become very strong. So strong that no one could beat him. Luke said he would be rooting for him. The most dangerous unit is probably the Devil's Platoon. It will suit the guy best. The name fully reflects the essence of the unit. This unit deals with other creatures, not humans. Demons. 2 weeks later, Lee's statistical interface showed a new task. For the Devil's Platoon, determined to become the best, the guy is on his way to becoming part of the Devil's Platoon. However, getting into the unit is difficult. He has to become the best student and succeed at every stage of his training. If you relax even a little bit, you have no chance. You always have to stay alert and act quickly and decisively. 82% progress. The Key of Fate Award. This was the data displayed to the guy in the statistical interface. A giant orc was brought to the soldiers. It had not been trained for several days. This meant that he was very hungry and thirsty for blood. Now everyone will fight this evil monster. So everyone took their positions. Luke will be watching everything, so the chance of getting hurt is not great, but one mistake can cost everyone. The monster was released. The battle began. One of the soldiers took the first blow. He blocked the giant's attack with his sword and barely held on. Lee did not hesitate long and swiftly moved to attack. He felled the monster with a powerful blow. Everyone rejoiced. However, the orc was not finished and started to attack the boy. He tried to dodge it. Fortunately, Lee's agility allowed him to do so. When he got too close to the monster, the boy struck a critical blow to the orc, after which the giant did not get up. Luke was amazed. The statistical interface showed that the task for the Devil's Platoon was completed. Leon had surpassed himself and achieved the result he had planned. However, he was filled with a strange feeling. He felt mana inside his body. After killing the monster, the orc's mana flowed into Lee's body through the sword. He could kill monsters and absorb their mana. He was filled with thoughts that if he killed hundreds or thousands of monsters, he would become extremely powerful. Meanwhile, Luke has already calculated all the points, and you are about to send everyone to the units according to the soldiers' points. The statistical interface has been updated. The task was completely completed. As a reward, Lee received the Key of Fate, namely the first dagger. It will connect the guy with his future rival. It is a dagger made of mithril, and the heart fragment of your designated opponent. The key will ring when the chosen one is nearby, and will also lead to him. It can be used as a weapon, but this option is not recommended. Lee noted that it looks expensive. It is a pity that it is not recommended for use as a weapon. But there must be a reason, he thought. He decided to use it as a weapon only in a dire situation. Jason came up to Lee. He was a new recruit, second only to Leon himself. He had once been a mercenary, so his level was quite appropriate. Jason asked the guy why he wanted to join the Devil's Platoon, since it was much more comfortable in the capital. Lee said that he wanted to become the strongest. Becoming the strongest means no longer being discriminated against and being above others. Jason objected to Leon and said that he did not quite understand him. After all, excessive bravery can be deadly. The boy accepted the answer and said that he appreciated his words. Lee listened to him, but did not move away from his goal. That's how the two friends parted ways. In addition, when quests from the statistical interface and items like the key appeared, the system also seemed to decide that this was the best option. Luke was ready to report the results. When everyone gathered, he announced the results. Jason was assigned to the capital. Leon joined the Devil's Platoon as he wanted. The Demon Forest was just for him. At the barracks, Jason invited Leon to come and visit him in the capital, since it was only a few days' ride from the Demon Forest to the capital. Lee agreed. He didn't know anyone else besides Jason, so he felt a certain attachment. In addition, Jason was the first to speak to Lee. The hero arrived at his destination, the Devil's Platoon. This special unit always had about 80 people in it, while others usually had several hundred. Although they were constantly accepting new recruits, the number of deaths was either equal to or exceeded the number of recruits. Their main task is to make sure that no monster crosses the border of the Demon Forest and enters the territory of humans. In theory, the Demon Forest is large, and monsters don't normally come out to call. There were almost no cases of them crossing the border of the Empire and harming civilians. This is the reason why the Devil's Platoon continues to exist, despite the number of only about 80 people. Jason told many stories of Lee. One of them was about a demon forest. The trail guarded by the Devil's Platoon was usually inhabited by low-level monsters. However, mid-level monsters would occasionally appear there as well. So if 80 people can stop the monsters, then each of them is quite strong. Some of them are said to be as strong as knights. In other words, if Lee can survive in the Devil's Platoon, he can become the strongest. The boy got to the hut, where the men of the Devil's Platoon were staying. The fireplace was burning brightly in the hut. The boy loudly opened the door, and said that he was a newcomer who had been assigned to them. Healthy men were sitting at the tables in the hut, laughing, talking, and drinking drinks. The boy looked at what was happening and felt a little uncomfortable. One burly man noticed him and asked him if he even knew where he was, calling him a kid. The men said he was scared, and that as soon as they started the operation he would be dead. The guy wondered why newcomers always die after arriving here. He believed that they were testing him in this way and trying to make him mad. If he lost his temper now, they would continue to think he was worthless and mock him, so he had to prove himself. Jason once said that soldiers in the Devil's Platoon are like mercenaries. Many consider themselves soldiers of the Empire. The statistical interface above the men's head showed that their level was quite high, and the boy's level was 42nd, the lowest of all. But that shouldn't have mattered much, Lee thought. He realized that he needed to make the right impression from the first seconds. With a confident smile, he told the burly man not to worry, but to simply test his mettle. Lee said he would be the last one to die. Lian's behavior had to match the desired strength. If he showed that he was afraid, he would be torn to pieces. The man was interested, but he laughed and said in a supercilious tone that he was quite funny and asked his partner if they had ever had such a bold recruit like him. The men thought, weren't they impressive enough? Asking for his name, they said he should know where he was. As they told the guy, it was the Devil's Platoon. Indeed, it was. The men told Lian that they were devils themselves. This was told to the boy by the unit commander, Hamilton. Lee could see that he was a powerful man, because when he spoke to him, the man's mana flickered around him. He was a powerful man, and he could use his mana to the fullest. This fact means that the standards of the platoon are quite high. For Lee, this was reassuring. Hamilton said that the devils do not trust their backs to just anyone. The commander had no idea where a short man like Lian came from. Hamilton warned Lian not to even participate in the hunt until he was fully accepted. Lee asked himself, what is hunting? Hunting monsters is the main job of the platoon. That's why they call themselves hunters, not soldiers. Lian asked what he had to do to join them. Soon he was given a task, the meaning of which was to collect 10 orc left ears in 1 week. If he could not do it within the specified period, he would die on the battlefield with the monsters next week, as no one from the group would help him. Subsequently, the hero moved to the demon forest. In Lian's statistical interface, a new task appeared. Become a devil. The branch of the 8th Devil Platoon did not accept you. You need to collect 10 orc left ears to prove your worth. The deadline for this task is 1 week. If you complete the task by the end of the deadline, the reward will be the maximum possible, namely acceptance into the 8th Division of the Devil's Platoon. Without hesitation, the guy set off on his journey. He had to stay focused. After all, monsters can appear anytime and anywhere. The boy listened and heard a roaring sound, as if a pack of giants were walking. He looked around and saw the giant head of one of the orcs. He quickly hid behind a tree. Looking behind him, he saw 4 strong orcs. He realized that it would be too difficult to deal with 4 orcs at once. But he had no choice. The boy concentrated. Filled with energy, he began to concentrate. When the orcs got too close, they smelled a human. At that moment, Lian rushed towards the nearest orc and cut off its head with a powerful movement. The giants were at a loss, because the attack was a surprise. One of the giants swung out to hit the boy, but Lee dodged and delivered another powerful blow to the monster's jaw. There were only two left. The giants were very angry. The young man realized that if he had not dodged the giant's attack at that moment, he would have died. But fortunately, he was very nimble. The boy continued to perform his quick movements with lightning speed, avoiding the orc's blows. He absorbed their mana. One of the giants got a powerful blow in the leg. When he fell down, he said it hurt, but the boy did not stop and finished him off with an instant blow to the chest. The corpses of orcs were lying on the battlefield in the forest. The boy went to rest. His energy began to recover, and it was not because of the rest, but because he began to absorb the mana flowing from these corpses. Strange sensations gripped the boy's body. He could feel every bone in his body being restored, and blue energy shone around him. He approached the giants and began to cut off their left ears. But a moment later, he heard a scream deep in the demonic forest. The cry sounded like a girl's voice. Lee quickly moved toward the sound. The only people who were allowed to go into the demon forest were members of the devil platoon or mercenaries who had received permission. As far as he knew, no mercenaries had entered the demon forest recently, and the platoon members had warned him that they would not hunt in the area today. That's why he came here. As he approached the source of the sound, Leon saw a girl tied to a tree begging for help. An unknown man was standing next to her. He ordered her to stand still and not whine. Lee thought that he should first understand the situation. It seemed that this girl was brought here against her will. The unidentified man said that the orcs would be here soon and she had to do everything they asked. The girl begged for mercy. However, the man said that he did not intend to kill her. He just wanted to sell her to the giants. The girl thought they would eat her. The man said that this was her fate, but he needed magic ingredients and the orcs needed a delicious meal. He said that the girl was lucky because orcs are not the only ones who like little girls. A rustling sound came from behind the bushes, and the man thought it was the orcs, but Leon stood in front of him. The man panicked because there were not supposed to be any troops today. Lee realized that this man was well aware of the work of the devil's platoon. In other words, everything was carefully planned and done not for the first time. The guy said that he was a new recruit of the devil's platoon. The man was scared. With a wave of his hand, Lee cut the ropes that bound the girl. The man was frightened by this wave and fell to the ground. The guy hugged the girl to him. The stranger began to concentrate his mana in his palms. Lee was confused, because if the man could use mana with such skill, he was clearly stronger than him. However, the man had no choice. He wanted to try to kill him. Even if the guy didn't like killing people, he had done it before. For example, those who attempted to kill him in the dungeons. Besides, this man clearly deserves to die. This is definitely a profitable kill. A moment later, the man released a magic projectile, which Leon barely deflected. The man continued to throw magic attacks. The guy continued to dodge the blows. He was wounded. Lee moved swiftly to strike the man, but he created a magic shield around him. Leon pierced it, and then the embarrassed man wanted to use some artifact to disappear from the battlefield. He vanished into thin air like smoke. Lee was upset, but there was a wound on his body near his shoulder caused by the magic projectile. The magic projectile was supposed to disappear after a certain time. He hoped that this would not happen soon, because when the magic projectile disappeared, the blood would surely start flowing like a river. If this happened, he would hardly have time to reach the base before he lost consciousness. Approaching the girl, he asked her how she was feeling, then asked her name. The girl's name was Gianel. He asked if she could walk, but it was hard for her to do so, so the man took her in his arms. Lian wondered how this man could kidnap such a young girl to feed her to the orcs. According to the magician, the orcs would be here soon, so it was better to get out of here as soon as possible. Carrying the girl in his arms, he dripped blood, leaving a trail. Lian brought the girl to the base. The men jumped up and came to him. He said that a middle-aged magician had grabbed the girl and tied her to a tree. The man said he was going to sell her to the orcs. It seems that some of the men recognized the girl. It was the daughter of the owner of one of the bars near the village of the Green Orcs. Lian put the girl on the ground, but he could barely hold on and fell to the floor. Hamilton said that the boy needed a healing potion. Lee began to lose consciousness. The statistical interface showed that the boy was in critical condition. However, the girl's salvation was not ignored. Therefore, the higher powers transformed the mana of light, which was in the boy's shoulder, into the mana of nature. The restoration began. The spirits of nature, who learned of the girl's salvation, became imbued with sympathy for him. The boy did not understand what had saved him and what they were talking about, but he was sure of one thing: he had survived. The protagonist woke up in bed. It seems that the mana cured him, and the system did not deceive him. At Lian's bedside was Jael. Not everyone who could use mana can be cured in this way. It turns out ironically that what wounded him later healed him. The pain was completely gone, but the boy's arm was still a little numb. He stroked the girl. When Lian left the room, he met Ms. Jamie. She told him to just call her sister. Lian agreed. Jamie said not to call her. Sis told Lee that Commander Hamilton was looking for him. She said that this incident could not be ignored. Lee asked how the platoon planned to address the problem. Nurse replied that she heard they were going to find out some information in the Green Orc village, and then to capture that mage. The boy thought that if he had reacted a little faster, he would have been able to capture the man. Lian felt great. His shoulder hardly hurt. His sister was surprised that he was able to recover in just 12 hours. They hadn't even used much medicine. Talking with his sister, they came to Hamilton. The commander said that only 2 days had passed since the guy's arrival, but he had managed to do a rather interesting thing. The boy went to the demon forest to collect orc ears. Hamilton asked how many he had collected. The boy put 4 ears on the table. The commander could not believe that in such a short period of time he managed to save the girl and collect orc ears in addition. They were facing an impressive recruit. Now Hamilton understood why the boy had been acting so arrogantly. Lian apologized, but the commander said there was no need to apologize. He said he likely and Hamilton was sure that the other members of the squad felt the same way. Their departments could not deal with this on their own. Liam was asked to help, although it was noted that it might be difficult for him to do so, as he had an injured shoulder. But the young man said he would do his best. Hamilton ordered Jamie to help Lian, assess the level of damage, and capture the magician. It didn't matter if they killed him or not, the main thing was to bring his body to feed the monster. Lee remembered that he should probably take Jael with him. It might be difficult for a child, so bring plenty of food, Hamilton said. The little sister was thrilled. Jamie told Lee to be ready at any time. She would take care of provisions and food for Lionel, so she ordered him to take a weapon and a double tent. Once they were ready, the heroes set off. 2 days later. During the journey, Lian took on most of the responsibilities. He could not ask the girls to do hard work. Jael was hungry, but the meat they had in reserve was very tough, so he had to soften it by soaking it in water. Ahead, the girl saw a sakura tree that looked like the trees that grew in her village. This meant they were getting close. Lian asked why their village was called the Village of the Green Orcs. The girl was unsure and replied that there were many orcs living nearby, but she was not 100% sure, but her father had told her about it. Jamie said that it is difficult to remember a difficult name, so they usually use the features of the village in the name. She noted that there is no point in using difficult names because so many villages have disappeared over time. A warm breeze blew. The heroes arrived at their destination. Behind the beautiful sakura trees, they could see a not-so-pleasant view. When the heroes arrived in the city, they were overwhelmed by devastation. There were very few people. Leon loudly exclaimed that he had brought back Joniel. A joyful man ran out of the rubble, and turned out to be the girl's father. They ran joyfully to meet each other. They hugged each other. People from all over the village came running to hear Lee's cry. Jamie told the villagers that she was from the Devil's platoon and asked what had happened here. The people looked at her and said nothing. Then Leon spoke up. He said that he was also from the Devil's platoon and had saved Joniel from the demon forest. He said they needed to know what was going on here to help. Joniel broke free from her father's arms and ran to Lee to tell him that her mom had been taken away and that he had to help them. Of course, the boy did not refuse. They shook their little fingers in a special gesture. Later, the father came over. He said it was orcs. However, Lee was sure that there shouldn't have been any monsters, because the Devil's platoon controlled everything and kept monsters out of people's territory. He believed it was the work of that magician. Jamie asked the name of the girl's father. His name was Lennon. She noticed that the border was guarded by the Devil's platoon. If this was a group of orc scouts, there was no way he could avoid being seen by the platoon and just run away. However, after a little thought, the girl answered that, indeed, there were about 5 of them. In a normal situation, they would have been able to handle them. But Lennon said they were other orcs. They were not like ordinary orcs. Joniel cried when she thought about what happened. Jamie said that if they were mutant monsters, there could be problems. Joniel's father said that they were definitely not ordinary. They were different in color. Orcs are usually completely green, but these had black markings. It was terrifying. It was like the army of Satan had reappeared. 3 of them used swords, 1 used an axe, and 1 used magic. The heroes were alarmed when they heard about the magic. That monster called fire from his hands and burned down our house. Even among hunters, magicians and priests were highly respected. There was one strange guy among the giants. He was wearing a robe, so he was not sure who he was, my father said. He said that if they didn't give them one young woman once a week, he would come again with the orcs and take the villagers away. Since the heroes were from the Devil's platoon, Lennon begged to save them. The orcs had attacked about 2 days ago, so there were still 4 days left. The heroes needed reinforcements. One of them would have to return to the base quickly. The girl gave the choice to the boy. Leon decided to stay, because he didn't know the way well, and it would be bad if he took a wrong turn. In addition, Jamie wanted to check something. So she had to come back quickly, and Lee had to help the residents rebuild and set up barricades. The girl left. Lee began to prepare. The villagers began construction. If the magician keeps his word, the people have 4 days before they return. By this time, they have to make the fortifications as much as possible. Luckily, it's not hard to get building materials, because wood and other things are scattered everywhere. In addition, residents bring materials from their destroyed homes. Despite being scared, they are now determined. Perhaps it is indeed fear for the children. Lee told Jamie that he would stay only because he was not familiar with the area. However, the fact is that something caught his eye. In the center of the village, the concentration of mana is much higher than anywhere else around. It was as if magic had been used. And not just any magic either. Something like a spell of fireballs, or magic projectiles. When he saw Lennon, the guy asked if he had seen exactly how many times magic had been used. At that time, there was chaos. Therefore, the man could not say for sure, but it seemed to him that about 5 to 6 times magic was used. Magic was used 5 to 6 times, but only one place was filled with mana. In other words, something is wrong with this point. Linen showed where the mage had disappeared and fled from sight. Liam was grateful and began to think. The magician had used teleportation magic, just like the time in the forest with the boy. But then he had less mana. Perhaps that much mana was left over from the number of creatures he had transported. As the boy came closer, he stretched out his hand and accidentally felt the mana energy. It appeared in front of him in the form of a flame. He could touch it and do minimal manipulations. After he touched it, he heard laughter, like the first time he saw mana, along with the sound of a message. He closed his eyes and concentrated. He began to hear thoughts and some voices. These were the voices of mana. Mana is alive and omnipresent. It is the living matter from which the universe is made. The voices began to call Lee a good soul, that he was a very nice and wonderful guy. Liam was pleased, but he wanted to stop listening to them, but he couldn't. The essence of mana, the same voices, noticed that the boy's connection with it became stronger, and he began to hear them. So the mana wanted to help and tell Lee about the evil wizard. Through the voices of mana, he heard that the magician was in a demonic forest. He was using dark, evil magic in the belly of a petrified lion. They ordered him to hurry. Liam began to lose consciousness. But then he woke up in a bed. He realized that it was the voices of mana. They had a bad opinion of the evil magician. The boy thought that it turns out that mana is alive. It could appear in the form of voices in his head. The concept is similar to molecules or atoms of the earth. He trusted the advice of mana. He took his sword and was determined to finish the thief. Getting out of bed, Lee went out to the villagers' yard to tell them what the mana had told him. The people continued to fortify the village and build barricades. His mind was racing with thoughts about the demon forest and the petrified lion in whose belly the magician uses magic. It would be worth asking the members of the platoon about this mystery, he thought. It's been 3 days since Jamie left for the base, so they should be back today. The fortifications are much stronger now, and should withstand some attacks. Now the villagers, led by Lee, were in the process of thinking of a contingency plan in case a critical situation occurred. Even in the worst-case scenario, half of the villagers would escape. However, he did not know what would happen to the villagers after they evacuated the village. The devil's platoon arrived in the village. Leon did a good job as a leader. But he was just doing his job. Hamilton was pleased with his work. After all, he was afraid of not being in time. But thanks to Lee, he felt safe for the peasants. The guy said that he had actually had to lead people before, so it was not the first time for him. In his last years in the army, he was a unit commander. And when he was a hunter, he led hunters of the same rank. Of course, he didn't have more than 200 people, but it wasn't that hard. The villagers wanted to protect their homes, so they followed his instructions. Thanks to this, everything went smoothly. There was still a lot of work to be done, but the commander told him to rest with Janie. Lee wanted to ask about the petrified lion, but he did not bother the commander because he thought he was busy. Since he was sent to Janie, he wanted to ask her. The villagers gave the heroes 2 huts where 2 people can live in each room. The guy was used to Janie, so he went to her room. He asked her if she would mind if Lee shared a room with her. She didn't mind, but she was worried about the guy. She wondered how a guy like that would be able to sleep well with such a beautiful woman by his side. Lee laughed. Janie said that her attractiveness might not be worth the risk. It was a joke. After all, Janie knows that nothing will disturb his sleep, he thought. He asked the girl how long she had been in the devil's platoon. She said about 2 years. By then, she must have known a lot about the demon forest. So Leon asked her if she had ever heard of a lion that turned into a stone. She wondered why he was asking her that. She said that it was probably a lion rock. It used to be a stone statue in the shape of a chimera. But now it is destroyed and has taken the shape of a lion. It is 4 meters high. Lee asked if it was in the middle of the forest. She said it was not as deep as he thought. It was in the orc's territory, but the girl had hardly been there. Lee smiled and was glad to have the information. The girl asked what the problem was then. The guy said that it was about a mage. He is on the Lion's Mountain. Jamie jumped out of bed and asked where he got this information. Lian didn't want to lie, but he couldn't tell the truth either. After all, if he mentioned what all the voices of Manhwa told him, Jamie would think he was crazy. The guy answered a little differently. He said that he had encountered a magician when he was saving Joniel. Before he disappeared, he mentioned a petrified lion. Lee hoped the girl believed him. She said that the magician could have used an invisibility spell. After Joniel returned to the village, their unit did not sit still. They checked the area around, but found only the rope that Lee had cut. So they had already searched the lion's rock. Jamie didn't know how thorough the platoon was, but it wasn't easy to escape them. If he wasn't caught, he probably wasn't here. Lee thought the girl had full faith in the skills of the Devil's platoon, but he was more inclined to believe she was Manhwa. After all, she had no reason to lie. If the evil wizard used invisibility magic, not everyone knows how to use such magic. Even though he didn't doubt the platoon, he believed the voices of the amnesia as well. Lian asked if there were any other rocks in the shape of a lion. The girl replied that there were none. Then the young man fell into thought. A magician in a demonic forest, in the belly of a fossilized lion. He thought about these words and realized that not a single normal person would be able to be inside the statue, as it would be uncomfortable. Then the intervention of magic was necessary. Lee wanted to see it with his own eyes. The heroes set off on their journey. The first journey to the Lion's Rock took 2 days. It will be unpleasant if the heroes do not find a magician here, because they need as many people as possible to fight the orcs. Lian wanted to go alone, but since he didn't know the way, he needed a companion. He thought that it would be quite difficult to get permission, but fortunately, he immediately agreed. Hamilton ordered Lian to go with Jamie and Chris. If that disgusting sorcerer was there, so would the kidnapped villagers. It would be quite difficult to rescue them. Chris led Lee and Jamie to the right path. Chris was a bit arrogant and annoyed, because he had come here many times before, and now he was ordered to lead the heroes here again. But that's his problem, Lian thought. When he arrived at the destination, he expected to see a somewhat larger statue, but it was not so big, and was shrouded in overgrown bushes, beaten and cracked. Chris said that they could search as much as they wanted, but he didn't believe they would find anything. Lian inhaled his breath of air. If magic was used here, then there must be a mana pool somewhere nearby. Concentrating, Lian walked around the statue. Chris wanted to leave, but the boy had found what he was looking for. Lian saw the leaks of energy and dark magic. His partner was still not satisfied. Lee showed that the secret entrance was in the mouth of a stone lion. Chris thought the guy was playing a joke on them, but he thought he was talking nonsense. If there was an entrance, there must be some kind of lever that would open the door. Each artifact or device has connecting elements, like an electronic circuit. Sometime later, the heroes, together with Hamilton, thought out a plan in which they came to the conclusion that they would not be able to cope with so many black orcs. A couple of people at most. Lian suggested that a certain group enter their territory to the shelter until no one was there. If the kidnapped residents are there, the heroes must rescue them by any means necessary. Chris was told that their squad exists for the sake of the Empire, so the safety of the Empire's citizens is their priority. After stopping for a while to help the village with its reconstruction, they calculated the time and set off. A couple of hours later, they came across the statue. Now it was time to put their plan into action. Lee walked up to the lion statue and pulled something next to the lion, something that looked like horns. But after that, nothing happened at first. Chris panicked that they had done it all for nothing. But then, there was a bright flash of light, and a portal appeared. Leon called Chris and Jamie to the portal, and they moved. They entered the dungeon. The heroes entered the 6th level dungeon for the first time, called the Dark Magician's Laboratory. In the next 24 hours, experience and rewards can be doubled. They began to look around the unknown dungeon. Lee said that the dungeon was very suitable for hunting, but he wasn't sure if there was a recovery here. And at that moment, Leon began to remember how in his past life he had also been hunting in this dungeon, but it ended in death for Lee. Jamie was interested in the presence of magic, and Chris was still dissatisfied. Lee hoped that the enemies hadn't heard them yet, and wanted to act very quietly and carefully, because there were only 3 of them. Since he was a swordsman, he took the initiative. Jamie is an archer, so she will create support from the bow. Chris prefers fast attacks with powerful daggers. In any case, Liam will have to be the first to fight. The heroes heard voices. People were screaming and begging for help. The black orcs said they would soon be eaten. Bones and corpses were already lying around. The first step was to shoot an arrow. Jamie pulled her bow and hit one of the orcs. However, the skin of black orcs is many times stronger than that of green orcs, so the arrow tickled the monster. But for a moment, the monster was distracted by this hit, and Leon and Chris quickly moved to attack. The dungeon was dark, so it was hard for the heroes to see anything. But Leon could already sense the orcs by their mana. He struck the first blow at the nearest monster, but it only scratched it. Black orcs are much stronger than green ones. If he were an ordinary green orc, Lee would have blown off his arm with such a blow. But he only made the giant angry. The monster pulled out his giant sword and swung at Leon. The strength of an ordinary orc is comparable to that of a trained adult, but a black orc is another matter altogether. At the last moment, Jam's arrow was diverted by the giant, and the boy tried to strike again, but in vain. Leon was furious. He gripped his sword tightly and concentrated. His eyes shone blue. His feelings began to be filled with not just anger, but full-blown anger. Anger because he had lived a life full of neglect and indifference to him. He began to remember the last moments before his death in his previous life. He remembered the death of his mother. The guy quickly moved to the giant to strike a powerful blow, and a blue aura shone around him. His friends were surprised. In a moment, the orc and Lee's swords collided, so hard that the hero no longer perceived any sound or felt the blow. The blow was too powerful. Both swords broke, and the monster lost its head. It died on the spot. Leon had spent a lot of energy on this attack, and he could barely stand up. But he realized one thing: he was stronger than even the black orc. He had created an aura, something he hadn't been able to do in his previous life. Then he was just a primitive swordsman who could not use mana or aura. But now he has become a full-fledged swordsman. After so many years of wandering in the dark, he finally sees the light. The ability to use mana and create aura. It feels like he could conquer the whole world. The interface showed that Lee's determination, albeit for a moment, made the mana follow his wishes. An unusual experience that makes mana tremble. The boy's level has been raised. Elixir. The Dark Wizard finished preparing the elixir. Drink of the Gods. He became a third-class wizard in the tower, where he spent 5 years without success. As a result, he was recognized as a nobody and expelled. After his expulsion from the tower, he delved into dark magic, conducting experiments in the demon forest. When necessary, he would catch monsters and use them as experimental material, which led to his epiphany. Dark magic is the demonic energy that monsters use, like knights use mana to strengthen their bodies or auras. The aging wizard continued his experiments and extended his life due to the effects of dark magic he discovered during his experiments. As he continued to live, the limit of his longevity was revealed. He realized that he needed dragon blood to create the perfect elixir, but he didn't believe he could find even one. Then it appeared a creature that drained dark magic, appeared just as the magician was about to give up. When the wizard first saw it, he felt only disgust. But soon he realized that this creature would be his salvation. His life, which he desperately clung to, continued for another 100 years. All this time, he continued his experiments. The creature with great magical power gave the dying man life. As before, his magic remained useless, his skills did not improve. However, his research moved forward. Since he was unable to obtain dragon blood, he began to look for an alternative. Several decades passed in this way. He found something that could create the perfect elixir, and when his experiments moved to the final stage, the villain Lian appeared on his way. Once again, Lian drove the dark magician to despair. By prolonging his life, unable to accept death at the very last moment, he was able to get rid of this old feeling. In the end, it was impossible. Even if he could create the perfect elixir, he still wouldn't be able to overcome his limit. He thanked Lian for granting him absolute despair and disappeared from this world. Somewhere in an abandoned castle, a hooded man approached his master. "My lord." The master said that the eighth had died, so he had to send Belakines. In our time, in the dungeon, Lian was looking for clues. This is where the dark magician was supposed to conduct his experiments. The message said that this was his laboratory. However, only prisoners and orcs were kept here. In addition to places with a high concentration of mana, you need to check those with a low concentration. There was less of it here than in other places. Liam was able to recognize mana that could think and speak, but it still amazed him. He reached out to the energy source, and his hand went through the wall. Lee found the dark magician's secret laboratory. There are no monsters inside the secret dungeon. He entered a room with a secret truth in it. Sometimes it is better not to know the whole truth. The boys saw the heart of Argol, also known as the frozen heart, which is worth hundreds of millions. If the spirit possessed the heart of a gargoyle, it would not increase the attribute of the earth by a little. In addition, the stone has the ability to slow down the aging of any awakened hunter. It was a very valuable object. The guy could get a fortune if he sold a couple of these things. He also saw a leaf of the world tree. It is said that the rejuvenating effect of the leaves of the world tree is better than that of a gargoyle's heart. There have even been cases where they have awakened ordinary people. This item alone can bring billions. The mana here is crystal clear. It was difficult for Lian to absorb it now, but he would take it with him, and try to do so when he was ready. Lian saw a door to another room and opened it. Large paintings appeared in front of him. It looked like a war between humans and monsters, with dragons on the side of humans. One of the men riding a dragon looked like Ignis's father from his dreams. As he looked around, he passed many paintings. He saw a painting with a knight. This person was different from the person in the first picture, especially in the backstage area. The interface showed that Lian had found a great truth. You have encountered a great truth. A task will be issued. You can accept it or refuse it. You have discovered no ordinary truth. You have recognized the heroes from your world on the continent of Pantheus. Find out who they are and how they came to this world. Find allies among them. The reward for completing the quest is unknown. The boy wondered who was depicted in the first picture. It seemed to be the heavenly Lord Chi-Wu. Lian did not know what to do with the task. After killing the black orc, the young man's level increased. Lian Ignis. Level 18, Occupation None. Title None, Strength, plus 325. Dexterity, plus 330. Endurance, plus 327. Wisdom, plus 123. Skills acquired. Intermediate swordsmanship, intermediate martial arts, Lord. Lian's scores rose slightly. He believed that he could really become stronger this way. People were recovering from captivity. Heroes helped them to recover. Some were crying for those who had died from the orcs. One of the women approached the giant's corpse and wanted to take out a dark layer from the insides. It began to emit a purple glow. Seeing this, Lee was frightened and ordered everyone to quickly go to the exit. Everyone quickly ran. The ball in the woman's hand exploded, and an evil sorcerer appeared. The heroes wanted to distract him. Janie pulled her bow and fired a shot. The arrow landed near the magician's leg. When the wizard was distracted by the arrow, Lee ran as fast as he could to get closer to the wizard to strike him. The sorcerer began to strike with magic balls, which the boy successfully dodged, and in a moment he struck the thief. But he dodged it. The magician said he was surprised and could not believe it. Lee asked him what he believed. The thief said that Leon had dragon blood. The boy was surprised and wondered who this magician was. After all, no one could find out the magic or blood type of another person. Not even a dark magician. An underdog like Leon has what a sorcerer has been looking for all his life, the thief thought. Now that Lee thinks about it, he can see and feel the mana, even talk to it. It is indeed of the dragon's blood. The young man asked the sorcerer why he was looking for the dragon's blood. The magician said that he was not obliged to tell him. Lee proposed a deal. If the magician cooperated, they might not have to meet again. If Lee knew about the experiments and the materials needed, he might be able to get them for the sorcerer. The magician did not immediately realize what the boy was offering. Leon told him to go back and remember their first meeting. He attacked the sorcerer only to save the girl. In the end, the child survived. Wasn't that enough to kill the guy? However, Lee pointed out that they were both seriously injured, so that would be a thing of the past. Instead, they should focus on the present situation. The magician needs the dragon's blood that flows inside the boy, and Lee is curious about its properties. Leon meant that their interests coincide. He could also find out how the sorcerer knew about the dragon's blood. The magician said that there was no point in making a deal, because he could just kill the boy and get what he wanted. Mana was angry at the dark wizard's attempts to bruise the boy. It enveloped the boy and gave him strength. Angry, Lee struck the sorcerer. However, he put up a magic shield. The young man said that he should have agreed to the deal, so the sorcerer could have lived longer. Leon's heart was beating very strongly, and he had an excess of mana energy. He dealt a critical blow to the magician. The magician disappeared. Returning to the laboratory, he decided to accept the task. Now the spirits of nature were watching Lee. His key appeared in front of him. He pointed to the painting. The calm mana of Znadsky dispersed. There was definitely something in the painting. When he touched the painting, he was energized. The painting burst into flames, and he saw the world on fire. The spirits of fire were raging everywhere. In a moment, a dragon emerged from the painting. The wall in the place of the painting collapsed and opened a passage. Leon went inside and saw the dragon's egg. It was absorbing his mana. The interface showed that Leon had met his partner, and he was full of joy. The partner immediately wanted to sign a contract. He was panicking that the guy might have escaped. Lee signed the contract. After the contract is completed, his partner enters the room. The guy could call him at any time. Everything is over. The hero came out of the dungeon. He was met by his friends, who thought he was dead. After all, according to them, he had been in the dungeon for 3 days. He did not understand how he could have stayed for 3 days. After signing the contract, he went to look for a spatial bag in the Dark Wizard's lab to take away expensive items. His friends reported that the portal was constantly under his nose, but when they tried to enter it, he was thrown out of it. Lee said that a dark magician appeared in the dungeon. They fought him, but he disappeared during the battle. Thanks to magic potions, he managed to survive. Most of the potions were broken when the wizard exploded, but only some of them survived. The boy asked how things were in the village. The soldiers from the platoon replied that it was difficult. However, after the disappearance of the wizard, they managed without significant losses. But the problem was different. Lee asked what had happened. He was told that there was a wave of monsters. The first step was to find the root of the problem and solve it. Otherwise, the number of monsters would grow and things would get much worse. Once a month, there is a wave of monsters, on the day when the poisonous magic accumulates. Since magic is inherently violent, the dark energy stimulates the monster's instincts, which creates a wave. Monsters not only harm people, they are also useful. By falling into the abyss, they help to restrain the growth of their numbers. Jamie couldn't believe that the wave hadn't come yet. It was supposed to happen a day ago. It's tiring because you have to be on guard all the time. They have created a team to deal with it. So everything will be cleared up soon, Jamie thought. Lee asked why they were on the same team as the first squad. Jamie replied that even with them, they were having a hard time. She was glad that Cecile was not there, because she likes to complicate things. Under normal circumstances, the wave of monsters would have already started. The platoon did not know what was happening inside the demon forest. They had to go in and find out why there was no wave yet. It would be too risky if they sent the whole platoon in. That's why they should split into 2 squads of 4 teams. Lee couldn't figure out whether they were lucky or not to be in the first squad. The team thought that the guy hadn't hunted with them before, so it was worth taking a newcomer with them. They didn't even know his skills. Lee thought that it was likely that when they heard from Jamie and Chris that he had killed a black orc, they doubted that he had, of course, in which case they thought that Lee had had some help. Before a battle, it's important to be united, which is why squad members need to learn as much as possible about the guy. They wouldn't have slandered the recruits for no reason. So Lee told the men that they hadn't really fought alongside him, and they didn't know anything about him. Then he definitely needs training, the men thought. This way they could get in the mood and bond together. Jamie came over and shouted at the men to leave Lee alone. The boy knew that if he wanted to stand in the row with them, he would have to face ridicule. The attitude depends on the recruit. One of the guys asked him if he was a member of the Devil's platoon, shouldn't he feel at home in the forest? He should be able to go into the forest at any time. Otherwise, he could not be considered a member of the platoon. Chris came over and said that they had to help Lee adapt to the demon forest. Chris handed Lee's things to him, and they got ready to go. Among themselves, the other guys were talking about Lee's strong spirit, and they wondered where he had trained it. But then they decided to argue. And one of the men said that Lee would probably not even make it halfway. The other one said that Liam would get a little more than halfway, and then he wouldn't be able to do it anymore. The other members also sided with each other. They decided to ask Hamilton for his opinion, and he said that Liam would be able to make it to the end, and he had no doubt about it. But the guys just laughed. Liam set off with serious thoughts, and the boys began to doubt that a newcomer would set off so quickly with heavy things. In fact, it was very difficult for Lee, but he did not want to show it. Blue mana appeared around Lee with messages that he had increased his strength and endurance. For Leon, it was funny that his partner was an egg, and he had no idea what to do with it. Holding the egg, he concentrated and was surrounded by mana again. Lee began to communicate with the egg, and in this mana, the egg showed its emotions. The egg decided to test Leon to see if he could become a master. It started to simulate a fire in his head. Lee walked forward with interest. A table appeared in front of him, where it was written about spirits that no one can see except unique mediums and contractors. The following was written: "Their eyes are on you. They are waiting for you to see them, and are wondering what you will do next." Lee had to satisfy their curiosity and earn their favor. The reward for this quest was firepower and peace. Lee realized that he would have to try very hard to see these spirits. Leon drew his sword and concentrated to make mana appear. When it surrounded Lee in the room, Lee began to hear the voices of these spirits. They were delighted with this guy. He decided to try to communicate with them. The spirits heard him, and he also heard their thoughts and conversations with each other. How they discussed his beauty. It was very difficult for Lee to choose between them. He was almost on the edge of his seat.